All right, welcome everyone to the next multi-network community sync. We have May 15th today, and let me share the link if you want to add yourself to what I'm sharing. And I think the topic is still DRA. Yesterday there was a community sync on the DRA, the device work group. I did invite John here, but I doubt I didn't ping him, so probably he's just busy with other stuff. We had a short meeting to some folks that haven't catch up on the Slack, but we did get a short meeting with John last Friday on kind of the integration with DRA on how could that happen. And kind of to give some highlight, I think John with team are trying to provide or do some sort of exercises around how the APIs could look like so that they are less complex or something. They have a goal to kind of look at whether there can be some new fresh set of eyes, look at it and maybe do some changes to this. So I think that's their goal. I'm not so close with their current agenda. I think that's the goal for team at least, to kind of simplify the complexity of DRA. And yesterday on the DRA meeting, Patrick was kind of even giving comparisons between what's currently in 130 for DRA versus what John is currently proposing and has in his GitHub kind of working repository. I'm not sure how many of you have been on that meeting. I think that the gist of it is that whatever John is, and we talked about with John last week probably, is still just, everything's on the like finger on the water, like everything is just in the air, I assume, on whether any proposals that John does will stick or not. I think that's what I'm getting out of this whole thing. So I think this is a place definitely to influence them, and to kind of achieve maybe what we need to achieve for multi-networking. Doc, I left half after the first half an hour. You probably been there for the whole thing. You have any other updates?
No, it only went on for another, well, it did go on for another maybe 10 minutes. But the bulk of the conversation happened in that half hour. Yeah, I guess I would say my take on it is I think that this is a positive movement, that it's recognized that, multi-networking could be achieved at some level using DRA, and it's nice to see those examples, and some of the stuff looks promising to me. And I like the way things work today with, say, SROV using device plugin and multi-CNI. It's rather convoluted. It's a challenge. So this looks better that way for devices, but in terms of like being able to use it at the end of the day, I think that I guess we have to figure out what are the things that we as this group are looking to get out of it, and how does it relate to the work we're doing here? Because what am I trying to say? Like, okay, like that parameterization with a config map or with a custom resource, I think that's good because it has that thing we've thought about here too, which is thinking, hey, we can't guess all of the possible networking parameters that you're going to want. You're going to need to loft some of those to the implementation, right? So that makes sense. that's all well and good. There is a part of me that says, does that kind of functionality take away from some of the stuff people don't like about Multis using CNI today? Like, it's a difficult to validate API. Does that add the same complexity? And then here's the other thing is it's like, does it add layers of complexity for things that could otherwise be really simple, right? Like now you have to set all of this stuff up with your DRA classes, this, that, the other thing. But people are going to use it, and people that are introduced to this space of multi-networking that are coming from an AI ML perspective or whatever, DRA is going to be the thing that they're exposed to when they go to set up their GPU. So it's going to make sense to them that I want another device, whether that's virtual or physical. DRA is going to make sense to me, right? But as we've discussed in this group, there's a couple things missing, one of which being like the status slash result of what happened, and that being necessary for a lot of different advanced networking workloads. And last but not least is we're all here for a reason. We all want to have some sort of native multi-networking in Kubernetes because it'll be better for users and better for our use cases. And at least for me, one of the things I am most interested in at the end of the day is having some services like functionality, network policy like functionality that folks can use. And then Mache, not to put words in your mouth, but I know you have been thinking about multi-tenancy and the changes to the default network, right? And they've said in this effort, like this doesn't touch the default network, right? That is a contentious point, but
So I think it can kind of boil down to how this whole thing is then piped down to in kubelet, right? And I did talk with Antonio. I'm not sure whether that I mentioned that, and he was kind of open to the case where, okay, you will have a path in CDI that will just do the whole networking through this, right, through the array. That's something that was mentioned. Because then that can probably be, I'm not sure whether that can be fully done like outside of core, right? Because I think that's SIG networking kind of heading towards to ensure that we don't introduce anything to the core. That's the main thing. And to give you some more context, we did have some brainstorming internally on this, what can be done. And one thing that I got stumbled upon is we were calling out Gateway API as the possibility to enable service like support, right? This is out of tree. So that's where we would have to talk with Shane is here. So I'm not sure it's not a surprise, but probably at one point we probably
it's still a North Star thing to try to replace service, or rather be an alternative to service. Service will never be replaced, but be an alternative to it for certain use cases.
Yeah. And basically this is the multi-network can be that use case, right? Where we can step in and start building something for multi-networking, of course, with the definite backward compatibility, where I would like to do all my services through Gateway API, right, for the whole thing, right? And then I can, and the value added would be multi-network support, right? That will be the kind of the driver for this, and that can be kind of good value for you as well from that point, I think. So there is that aspect, and basically the other aspects were network policies. And what I learned, there is apparently a effort to create a network policy v2. Anyone is aware of that? Something that's happening as a CRD as well. And basically at that point, we don't have to be baked into the core network policy. We can as well be done and basically follow up the same path for that there. And why I'm bringing this up, because the proposal was, can we create a community based CRD for network representation, right? Something like whether we're gonna take up on network attachment definition. This is an open source and existing. It's open text, so contentious. But if we were to define a multi-networking like gateway APIs, which a gateway API or network policy v2 could accept as a reference in their objects, right? Thoughts? That's something that was kind of floated when we talked internally. What will be the next stage for this? And I think this is something that how this connects to DRA, how this is kind of interconnecting. The thing here with DRA, then the claim can point to a custom resource, right? Right now, I think that's very convoluted in John's approach. I think in the core, it's much more simpler. But then basically the CRD, the controller for the CRD can create everything that DRA expects from such CRD, right? Whether it has to be a class or any other preparations for the DRA, but then you create the kind of the user-facing object by yourself, right? In our case, that would be the pod network, let's say, and that will be the object defined in the Kubernetes org that we will all agree on. So the DRA will point to that, and there will be controller that will handle that for DRA, right? At least for the basic APIs kind of side of the things. That
At a
way,
high level, DRA feels so weird to me for this.
I am with you, Shane. I don't think we will convince anyone today to add another field to pod. I agree with you. That's so my proposal is like for multi-networking is very clean, right? It's straightforward pod networks and what's that. But
why do you think we'll never get another field in pod? I haven't been to these meetings in a while, but just like let's I guess just talk about that a little bit.
The pushback on introducing a network representation in core is just, and I assume DRA has such a big dollar value behind it, the AI stuff, that okay, that's acceptable, that level of complexity, but multi-network, it doesn't have that, right? That's why.
To me, it seems like you could have DRA in. I get a little bit. I talked to Tim about this in Paris. We sat down and I said, I don't feel like DRA seems like a square peg round hole kind of situation when it comes to network. And he said, yes, it does today, but we're looking at the future and we expect it to be more along the line. I can see it growing into a place where as an implementation detail, DRA could be used under the hood to get resources. I get that. But from a user perspective, like what the user actually specifies, it only makes sense to me that they would be able to specify network interface information on the pod. And if we're at a point where we don't feel like we can even make changes to the pod, what does that mean for Kubernetes? Is it done? Is it we're done with the API forever? That doesn't sound healthy to me. And I think we should continue to push back on that.
That's a fair point. Yeah. I agree on you with that one, because that's kind of how it's. So we are maintaining only the project now, so that it's stable. That's kind of where we at, right? That's I don't know how to treat that, and Shane, that's a valid point, right? What and how we can treat that, whether we should push on the one or the other. Yeah, go ahead, Doug. You're muted. Or you misclicked.
Yeah, I misclicked for sure. Thank you for the heads up. Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to throw in there, and was that the kind of the take that I've gotten between Tim and Antonio is that multi-networking is for a minority of users. I've tried to say that that's not a fair representation, because I do believe that users that care about multi-networking happen to have scaled environments. So saying it's a minority, I don't think is representative of actually, the delivering these important features to large users. So that's my take. But then the other thing that I've heard, primarily from Antonio, is that there's not a strong desire to represent infrastructure and Kubernetes land, right?
I
That it's not an
so I will
infrastructure.
that argument. I heard that argument from Antonio, but it's not valid. We have a node, that's compute. We have a storage,
Yep, agreed.
so that's not a valid argument. And I will please don't repeat that argument in front of me because I'm I heard
Yeah,
that
don't worry, it's not
and I
recorded or anything.
It's,
yeah,
no, I'm the one,
it's not true.
I'm the one relaying this, and
Yeah.
I mean, I tend to agree with you. I think that storage is a very good argument here. I mean, it has a similar type of representation, and what does
And node
storage
represents
mean?
compute. Node
Sure.
represents memory and
I
compute. So
I agree with what Mache is saying, and I get what you're saying, Doug. I get that DRA can be helpful, but again, it just feels like more of a lower level implementation detail thing. It's like how the implementations behind a network interface might ultimately do some resource allocation to fulfill the desired or the declared intent of the pod. Maybe, but I think if we came back and looked at it a different way, forget about multi-network, because I think the argument that multi-network is niche, I don't know. I contributed to Multis back when I worked on the Convoy Kubernetes distribution like 6 years ago, and I felt like it was fairly widely used by our customers. So I don't know. My inclination has been that multi-network is not very niche. It may not be the majority of users, but it definitely isn't like a tiny amount. But we could just phrase this whole project and as we want network interfaces on pods. We don't have to call it multi-network. We could say it's network interfaces for pods. And as a byproduct, because pods can have more than one interface in a network namespace, we would want to support that in the specification for the interface. Like, it just seems so obvious that you would want to have interfaces on your pods, and there'd be more than one. You don't just get one interface. So I think that it sounds like there's some like I don't know, some sentiment of maybe like we can't push on that anymore. But I think that we could, if I think Antonio and Tim are reasonable. I think maybe the only reason that they have kind of made this sound, the only reason we think that Antonio and Tim are saying we're not going that direction is because they haven't heard us be loud enough that no, in fact, that is what we want and need. And we need to have a lot of support and allies come to the table and say, look, here are all of our different use cases and all of our different reasons for doing this. But focus in on this one point, don't say multi-network and all this other stuff. Just say we want interfaces or network interfaces on the pod. And here's the reasons. I have a couple of specific reasons for this. One of them is I have telco people that I work with that they want the ability to do something like configure the routing table for the pod and have multiple interfaces and be able to say like one route's here, one route's there at the pod level. And they're kind of doing that today with their own CRDs, and they'd rather that be a standard. And I think that's a fairly common use case among telcos. Zappa can kind of back me up on that because I know he's working with some telcos too.
yeah, we have that's true, but that is still niche. And to be honest with you, Shane, network interface, there is a problem with that, right? Because we want to have a network representation. Because network interface is per pod only. That's not good. I don't want to set up a network policy, for example, per network interface per pod. I want to have a network policy on the whole network or a service attached to a network, right? Because then you can
absolutely
kind of group them in a different way. So I know where you're coming from. Well, I don't think that solves the whole big picture, unfortunately.
No, it doesn't. And in KNI, this is actually one of the things that I was pushing for, and Doug's been there for this too, is a combination of network interfaces on pods and networks actually being something that exists in the API. And I don't know that my opinion on this is super popular, but something like a network class is something I'm actually somewhat in favor of, at least experimenting with. So that
Network
there's
class
different.
is just another word for a pod network, right? That's what we propose, right? But
Yeah.
it's the same.
I don't
It's,
care what it's named. I don't care what it's
yeah,
named. But
we
the
don't. We
point,
neither. We
yeah,
neither.
the point
right?
just being like, I understand what you're saying, that this is multifaceted, and you can't just say, oh, we have interfaces on a pod network, and now the story is taken care of. It's more than that, and I'm on board for trying to work through what that would be, but I just don't see, to get to multi-network support, it being something where we use DRA and the end user is saying, I'm going to use a resource allocation request to get, like, that doesn't
No,
flow for me.
UX is terrible. Yeah, I agree with you. Like the user experience, the customer user journey is just awful. Create pod network, go to the pod, create a resource. What is it called? Resource claim. Today it's still a resource claim. In the resource claim, reference that pod network, and then inside pod network, reference the network attachment definition, for example, right? It's not the best.
Yeah.
Pete,
It's weird.
you muted.
I managed to put my hand down, but not unmute myself. Computers are a mystery to me. Yeah, I was just going to say, I don't think I'm disagreeing with anyone here. I think my impression of the pushback is that it's all the same problem wrapped up in slightly different words, and that is all about complexity. They're worried that this will be too complex for ordinary users, and I've actually got a lot of sympathy with that. You don't want your ordinary users to care about this stuff if they don't need to. And there's a real worry that when we say things like, we want to expose this, this, and this, they think, oh, that'll make it harder for users. I don't know how to get around that, except to say that one of the things we have to have front and center is, here's why it won't be more complex for real users, and hopefully have a good set of arguments for
And
that.
I think the cap covers that, because we said if someone doesn't care, we will just create a default pod network that you don't even have to worry about. And
yeah, the
that's
CAP
it.
does. Well, last time I read it, which was a couple months ago, the CAP did totally try to cover that.
Right. So
I think
Is there
the
a better way?
perception
Do we
people
need to cover
have,
it more?
I think the perception people have is that it's going to become more complicated and difficult, and it is going to lead to all kinds of knock-on side effects. I don't know if that's a realistic perception. I don't think it has to, but that, I think, is a worry people have. And the talk about DRA, to me, ties into that, because I think people are thinking, well, this is a complex thing. DRA is a complex thing. Can't you do one complex thing with the other complex thing? I think that is a little bit the mindset that everyone is in.
Yeah, so basically can it be a superset, right? A subset. Can networking be handled by the super complex DRA, right? And basically we just need the 5% of that to handle us, right? And that's true because it's probably can, but as Shane mentioned, the user journey for using it will be just who's gonna. Yeah, that's.
It's okay. I'm gonna start my startup that is basically like just an operator for auto configuring your DRA for you with CRD.
There you go.
Let's
Business
have
plan.
easy CRD. This is gonna be my new business model. So let's just go. That's cool, actually.
Yeah, that's
the other argument against multi-network is, at the moment we have something. We have Multus. I like Multus. It does the job. I can pick holes in it and complain about this, that, and the other, but whatever we come up with has to be better than Multus, or none of our users are going to move because they're used to Multus. So
exactly
That is a very fair point.
The big sales point to me was always, look, you've got all this crazy JSON spaghetti that you put in annotations. You don't want to do that.
Yeah.
You want to just have nice proper pod fields that will be properly authenticated, that your Azure policy will understand, that will be consistent everywhere, that don't have weird things in them. And that was a selling point. That was something where people would look at it and say, that's great. But there is a danger that we come up with something where people look at it and go, yeah, we've got Multus. Why would we bother with this new thing?
So you heard one aspect that I mentioned even last week, the scheduler. You'll get that, right? That's your value added, right? You get your node selectiveness of a network, right? So I have network A on node A and B, but network C is on C and D, right? Network C
So
is on C and D, right? So that's the value added. Today, how we do it is through, I'm not sure how many of you trying that, but how you do it, you have to do some mutating webhooks on the pod to inject special some resource to kind of trick the scheduler to, okay, this guy is only on this nodes, this guy's on that nodes, right? That's how you do it today. It works. To be honest with you, it's not that it doesn't work, but you have to do that mutating webhook, right, for that.
Yeah, or you have a static label configuration, but then that's not the easiest thing to maintain either.
Yeah.
Interestingly, you could use DRA. You could use DRA plus Maltus, and you could get away. But then at that point, you've got all the complexity of both, and you put the two together, and then people's heads explode.
Yeah, then it's even worse. Yeah. Right. I don't know where to. Any plan? Any. I don't know what we can, how to move forward. I'm kind of at the bind myself. Is this something that's
Time to put
what
something
other
on the agenda for the SIG network meeting and basically come back and say, look, we have looked at this over and over again, and the DRA situation seems like something that we could incorporate, but it doesn't necessarily feel like the right thing for the higher level API for users, and just open the conversation up again. I think that'd be my proposal. Obviously, there's a point where we have to kind of. I don't know that we're at that point yet, though. Is basically what I'm saying. I don't think we're at the point where we have to basically say we have to deal, and I think we kind of owe it to the users to try a little bit more, because I think it might be we haven't been loud enough kind of situation. Maybe you correct me if I'm wrong.
I
But
kind of
that's how it
agree.
feels to me.
I'm trying my best, but I think I'm slowly conceding. That's where I'm trying this whole almost half a year since December. No, not December. I was out. So since like January and February, and I'm slowly conceding.
I have no other wrenches to throw into the gears today.
No, those are good ones, by the way, Shane. We were like, we are on full speed ahead for DRA, and you bringing up that it's not the best user guide, and that was true, but I think nobody was bringing that up, and yeah, thanks for that.
Well, you know what? I mean, I think this is one of those cases where having some sort of demo to show, like, for example, okay, hey, with this model that we're proposing, you change this one item on a pod spec and you specify this network object, and that's all you need. And then if you were gonna do this with DRA, then I need to explain to you device classes, claims, this, that, and the other, which and I see an advantage over device plugin for that in a large way. However, for maybe your more run-of-the-mill virtual unrestricted by device constraints sort of setup, it might be more complicated than you need. So I'm gonna think on that one a minute too, but yeah, I agree. It's like, I kind of feel like the one opportunity that is here, I think, is if we can find a synergy with what's happening with these changes for DRA, that we can attach ourselves to in order to help propel the proposals that we have in this group, that could be in our advantage, because like you said, Mache, if you have the magic 4 letters AIML, next to your project, you get a lot of money and attention for it. And I actually think that multi-networking is more important for AIML cases than we might think. But we got to find those synergies, because that may be the way to get more of a voice behind it. Because maybe it does feel like it's a minority of users because it's a minority of representation. So good point, Shane, for sure.
And that's, I think that's where the contentious is as well around that one, right? You would do the device type resources, let's say your PFs, BFs through DRA. You will still have to for AI, or even with today we for SRV, we still have to use device plugins anyway. And now no way around that. And for the other things, we just use just the standard CNI path, right? So this is where the kind of DRA can unify that in some ways. Argument towards that, where you have one APIs that does both things, right? Though the paths, configuration paths will be slightly different probably, or might be unified in some ways. I think this is where the synergy goes, Doug, I think. But yeah, doesn't change the fact that the UX is awful.
Does anybody feel inclined to put that on the agenda for the next meeting so we can try and discuss?
Yeah. I will think about that and myself to get some better argumentation. But I think I need. My problem is I'm feeling alone on those SIG network meetings.
Oh, I'll back you up. I'll
that's my
turn my camera
kind
on
of
and everything.
I'm bringing this up and being and that's kind of feeling I'm only one kind of trying to push for that.
Yeah,
So this is something that I need more voice. I am trying to rally folks here. The few times I try that, but I think that's where what you're saying, Shane. We are not screaming loud because I'm the
We're not a
only
unified
one.
voice yet. Yes, we need to get there.
Yeah, and I think we needed like better, like this one meeting, like what was it in March or something, where I was hoping we would have like every possible vendor and platform there to kind of push for this, but didn't really happen. And that's the problem, right? I think as well, right? We are not screaming loud enough, and I think that
organized. We just need to get organized. I think Tim and Antonio, if they see a bunch of people organized around, hey, this is an issue, we'll be like, oh, okay, this is an issue.
Yeah. Exactly.
I think part of that organization has to be talking to people individually beforehand. Ideally, you go into the meeting and you've already got the key players on your side, and then just all rolls through.
That might be the case as well, Pete. I agree with you. Maybe that the last time wasn't properly vetted.
I think this is a very hard thing to do. I'm going to say that. This is not the sort of thing I've seen people do it, but it's like watching people do ballet dancing. I know I could never do anything like that, but I can see the skill.
We need some sort of spin doctor or something here. Looks like. Okay. I think
he said that doing consensus building in upstream is like ballet. I like that a lot. That's just funny.
Oh, that's a fair point. Yeah, that's
funny.
Fair point.
It's like ballet. It requires all kinds of smooth moves and great landings.
Yeah, that's fair point. Yes. Okay, I think we had some discussion on that. One update from my side: I will be taking some time off for my baby. I got a baby this year, so basically I'm gonna take my paternity leave in July, folks. So I will be a few months. I'm probably gonna be back sometime September. So I will probably, Doug, I will ask you, or unless someone else volunteer, to lead that in July, and then moving forward for through August. But then just kind of bring that up today so that you're aware I will be gone through the summer.
I'm happy to pitch in. I'd love to get like a rotation of of chairs maybe a little bit. I also am going to take a decent summer break, but not nearly as long
Yeah,
as
that's
that
fair.
one. But yeah,
I sorry for put you in the spot. That's
I can
yeah.
help.
Let's,
no,
I can
it's-
help run meetings in July too, actually, if needed. So just always consider. I'm a chair. I think everybody knows that, but I'm always available for backup for any of the sub projects. So just let me know.
sounds great. That's an awesome offer. Okay, we'll keep that in mind, Shane, as well. All right, folks. I think any other topics to what we discussed. I will probably put that agenda item. We can the SIG networking is next week. We will meet next week as well. So I'll let you know. Then we can further discuss on that one. But we can add that and basically say that we did additional reevaluation, and it's the UX is just awful. I don't know. There are two sides, right? Because keep in mind that the physical representation of devices still will have to go through DRA. That's networking for that as well. So it's both sides, right? It's always both sides are hard.
But not say just to add, I'm not. It's quite complicated. I try to follow your talk as well in SIG network and device management. There is quite a lot of people looking at some other use cases, but wouldn't be also good to lift up where DRI for sure help on one part, which is of course the scheduling and so on, and that's it. There will be hard because they see things as just devices. So yeah, network is a device, attach, detach, and a claim, and that's it. But the networking as such is more than claiming two CPUs and a set of memory. It's more than that. You need number of other API objects to realize the reachability to those ones. It's not just claiming. And for that, maybe as you said, I mean, they are challenged with the pod spec. They are challenged to change certain APIs because they see it complex. If you just mention service or network policies, maybe this is the route to DRA. This is the value add, but limited. However, the challenges when one look at the whole, let's say, the whole networking ecosystem, what it means to ask for network and to try to be also reachable on it. I mean, there are millions of other things, everything from IPAM, routing, firewall rules, you name it. And that will be a hinder with DRI, at least how it been today, apart from any object that will rely on those ones will have to ask the claims or wherever the class or to get the continuous updates. So maybe one could prawns with DRA or the advantage whether limited and the all other parts of the ecosystem that it's hard to build on with the DRA route. It could be done, but I don't see how today. I've been trying to look at, okay, how do we make current CNI work with DI? Not really. And of course, the good work or the proposal of KNI that could eventually help in, marrying these pieces together. At least that, because every time, at least what I heard in SIG network is that DRA should be the choice, but then they see the network as just a device, at least in those conversations, and that is probably not the only thing multi-networking is needed.
I think
Sorry,
I agree. I do think I could see DRA being something that the implementers might be encouraged to use, though. That's something like not the users, but I don't know.
So, Machine, one important factual this is I would not want to say that, yeah, because we want to in the future to have firewalls or something, right? So that's something that, because I want to keep the complexity to the minimum.
Yeah.
That's why I'm calling out. We just want to have a network representation, a handler. That's it. That's what this whole community is all about, right? And that's something that we discuss as well for DRA. DRA is all about what you say. It's all about getting an existing object. That's another aspect, right, to this, right? We can bend it in some ways, but basically DRA is all about, I have a set of GPUs, a set of CPUs, a set of X device networks or what's not, FPGAs that are prepared for me. And I know what is the absolute value and maximum value of those resources. It's limited, it's finite, and give me some of it. And basically with some properties, align things with properties, and that's it, right? For networking, that's not the case. I have a VET pair, and I can create, depending on this, within the limitation probably is inode, right? Number on the Linux kernel, right? That's how many of VETs I can have, right? But that's basically, that's more than definitely the 100 pods you can have. So that's the difference as well between for what we need for networking versus the DRA, right? We can bend it in such a way, let's say we can make an IP as a resource, right? And that can be the finite resource that we will calculate and prepare. Okay, I have an IPAM on this resource, and then basically per each node I have like 20 of it for each, right? Or even 100, then the maximum number if I don't care, right? But then that's my kind of resource that I can treat as, right, and bend that. There's ways to kind of go around it, but that's not exactly, that's the kind of the different aspect and focus of DRA versus what we need in multi-networking, because DRA is all about like resources, matching resources and give it to the pod. We are about just representation of a network. And how it's connected, that's a side effect. As Shane, as you mentioned, it's a implementation detail, basically, right? SROV, yes, right? We need that because we need the array probably. We get away with just device plugin, but we probably could use the array for being more elaborate, right? But yeah, I think that's as well my 2 cents. All right, folks, let's call it. Let's digest what we discussed today. Let's come back next week and think what we can move, how we can move forward. Should we pursue further on the DRA, or should we push back and think of, now we want to have the multi-networking as a for the CUJ. It's for a better CUJ in the pod spec and do something about that. And what sort of complexities we have to identify in the current cap that doesn't work, right? What sort of things are not there defined that, and let's just maybe, rather than sitting and wringing our hands around DRA, let's just start talking about the services, how they're gonna, and all those things that we said, okay, we're gonna do in a later phase. Okay, let's just do them now, right? Let's since we are basically stuck anyway, so let's start talking about all those other elements and how they're gonna behave with multi-network. I think that's, we can start moving on that one and define that.
Sounds good. It was good to catch up with you guys.
Yeah.
All right, thanks Shane for coming. Stirring up the pot. that was good. All right, folks.
Thank you all.
Thanks
Cheers.
all.
Thanks. Bye.